The XFL, week one, it's done. The wait's finally over. 3 years of patiently waiting, and it led to pretty good game overall. I mean, it could be better. It's not the NFL, but I'm just going to go over it in a quick recap. And by quick, it's going to be one of the longer videos I've done for a little bit. Let's start with what I predicted. I predicted Vegas beats Arlington, Houston beats Orlando, St. Louis beats San Antonio, and DC beats Seattle. I wasn't cheering for all of those teams, but I was just saying that I think that they would win. Vegas, they started off strong. Luis Perez threw not one, but two pick sixes, which pretty much nailed that coffin shut. Arlington really only put together 6 points of total offense, so I was pretty close to being right, just a couple minutes away. Vegas lost by 2. Orlando versus the Houston Roughnecks. Houston walked all over them. Orlando put up great stats. One of the better teams stat-wise overall. I mean, it wasn't a bad team. But with 4 turnovers that Houston caused, it was definitely a problem for them, which is really what let Houston run away with the game. St. Louis versus San Antonio, one of the most boring games until like the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter. A.J. McCarron did what I thought he was going to do. He's a veteran quarterback, situational football, and he pulled a Tom Brady and won with like 2 more minutes to go. San Antonio had the best rushing game throughout the entire league with over 100 yards, which none other team was actually able to do. So all in all, Jack Cohn, he played well at quarterback, but I would put most of the blame on their coach Hines Ward. You've got to be able to stop, 2 touchdowns coming at you quickly with only a couple seconds left to go. So, finally, we had the Defenders versus Seattle. That was a fun game to watch. If you're out there and you're like, do I like the XFL? Do I not? Which, face it, if you're watching this channel, it's a recreational XFL person. You are either doing it because you know me or you really like the XFL. So, but if you're wondering, do I like the XFL or not, watch DC, okay? Because that was a funny game to watch. They got some crazy fans. Anyway, so I'm just going to go over the passing for each team real quick. Seattle had the best passing stats. Well, not the best. They just had the most yards, so we're going to start with them. They had 288 total yards in passing. June Jones really started off, right out of the gate. He had Ben DiNucci, the Gucci, flying, throwing deep balls. He went 36 for 56, averaged 5.1 yards. Later in the game, it was looking a little more rough. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions with a long of 31 yards. The fans, I would say, really got to the team later on. Orlando actually had the second best passing yard stat line, which, looking at it from the way they drafted, I would figure they were going to have a really good passing line. They actually didn't pass as much, partially because they turned the football over to Houston so many times. But they had 27 for 39. It wasn't like the best percentage-wise. They averaged 6.5 yards a pass. Touchdown interception ratio, they went 2 for 2. No, they went 3 for 2, I'm sorry. 3 for 2, long of 46 yards. 2 for 3. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong line on my sheet. They went 2 for 3, so 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, long of 51. Houston, right underneath Orlando at number 3. Passing-wise, they had 26 out of 42 passes complete. 272 total yards, averaged 6.5. Touchdown to interception ratio was 50-50. 2 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. With a long of 46, Brandon Silvers really looked good out there. They started playing Cole McDonald a little more just because he's that more X-Factors type quarterback. So I really wanted to see what Cole McDonald would do passing-wise, but he never threw a pass during that game. You were leading by a decent amount. You didn't really need to throw the ball at all, unless you wanted to get him some tape. Vegas, number 4, you got Luis Perez. He's a veteran quarterback in leagues like this, and then you had Martavius Bryant. So I would have thought Vegas would have a super high passing. They were on the top part of the league with 249 total yards, to 22 for 36, which pretty good stat line. Averaged 6.9 yards a play. Touchdown to interception ratio, they actually had 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, which is different than most of these quarterbacks with a long of 39 yards. Luis Perez did throw two interceptions, 5 touchdowns. Both of those interceptions were returned for pick 6. Next up, San Antonio. They had 207 yards of total offense, and they are the last team to surpass 200 total yards in passing. They went 25 for 36, touchdown to interception ratio, 1-on-1, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. 5.8 yards per play, and then a long of 29. It was an exciting offense to watch. St. Louis right behind them, 18 for 26, 190 total yards, average 7.3 yards per pass. Touchdown to interception ratio was 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They had a long of 33 yards. Dallas had 19 to 25 with 175 total yards. Drew Plitt didn't exactly scare me with his passing ability. I personally would have stuck out Kyle Sloter a bit earlier, but they were leaning on their defense. I don't think he needed to play Kyle Sloter at the time. They took a lead just using, the pick sixes at that point. So Dallas, it wasn't a bougie offense by any means. They had 6.9 yards per play on the pass in the air. Touchdown to interception, they had 1 interception, 0 touchdowns with a long of 22 yards. DC, they went 9 for 21. The worst team so far, completion-wise, they were actually they were the only team that didn't complete over 50%. That's with Jordan Teamu at the helm. They only had 93 yards of total passing, and that's through 4 quarters. They actually had quite a number of plays that they actually played. They averaged 44 yards a pass. No, not 44. 4.4 yards a pass. Touchdown to interception ratio 0-1, so 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. You had a long of 18. It was not an exciting game in the air that night. It was all about the run game. Speaking of the running game, let's talk about that. San Antonio had the best and the most yards with 133 rushing yards, which, that's pretty good for anyone's standards. That's a good rushing stat line to have. They did surpass, 300 total yards of offense. They had 39 attempts on the ground, which was, I believe, the most out of any of the teams. 3.4 yards averaged out. Dallas, they had 83 yards on the ground. That was the second. No, it wasn't the second best in yardage. It was third best, right behind DC with 84. But they ran less plays to get that. They averaged 2.7 yards on the ground. DC got 84 yards, just 1 more yard. But they did that in 33 attempts as compared to 31. That's why I put them at number 3. 2.5 yards, that's what they averaged out. Now, Derek King was very exciting to watch. They switched him out for Jordan Teamu, which nearly cost him the game. It was right down to the wire. I would not personally have put in Jordan Teamu. I just would have kept running with Derek King. And later on, it was one of the few passes that they did, and he threw an interception late in the fourth quarter, nearly allowing Ben DiNucci, the Gucci, to go back and win. However, a dominant running performance by Abraham Smith. He looked really good out there. Houston had 81 yards with 20 attempts, which I would say is one of the best out there. We had 4 yards per carry, which I would say, according to anybody, that's pretty good. I know he's a smaller guy, but he was really strong in those big piles. Orlando had 78 yards to 16 attempts, one of the highest average rushing attempts. So I think maybe Orlando needs to maybe dive into that a little bit more. Now they had the third least passing attempts. So I think rushing attempts, out of everyone. But they really looked good. St. Louis, 68 yards to 15 attempts, averaged 4.5 yards a carry. Seattle, it's a June Jones offense. They got 51 yards, only ran the ball 17 times. They averaged 3 yards a carry. And then Vegas, 25 yards and 15 attempts. They averaged only 1.5 yards. So looking at it, watching the game, Vegas, it was rare. It was rare that a running back ever got through the line of scrimmage. It was bad watching them. Anytime they ran the ball, it was just like, oop, okay. I think their longest run of the night was 10 yards, I think, which you ask anybody, that's not good at all. So Vegas, they had a good passing offense, but I'm just a little concerned about the rushing offense, which, if you're only bringing out 1.5 yards a carry, it's not a good look at all. Defensively, I would say Houston underneath Wade Phillips, the graying giant, the man, the myth, the legend. They had 7 sacks, which was the league high of week 1. 8 tackles for loss. That was not the league high. Believe it or not, there's one even more. 3 interceptions, 1 fumble. They led the league in turnovers. Now, granted, one of the interceptions was actually a pick 6, but it was taken back for a low block. So we still got the turnover, but we had to score, using conventional methods. And number 2, I put Las Vegas, not for their sack ratio or their interceptions being super high. They had 3 sacks. They had 10 tackles for losses. That's why I put them at number 2 overall. Maybe that's a little bit high. Maybe maybe y'all can figure that out by yourself. 1 interception. San Antonio at number 3, they had 5 sacks, 9 tackles for losses, but the reason I put them underneath Las Vegas was the lack of interceptions. Dallas had 3 sacks, 6 tackles for losses, so nothing bougie up there on the line of scrimmage. However, the 2 pick 6s were major roles in the game, which I think that's Luis Perez, not exactly Arlington or Dallas's defensive prowess. I just think that's Luis Perez being stupid. Both of those touchdowns. And then DC, they had 2 sacks, 5 tackles for losses, 2 interceptions, 1 was returned for a touchdown. That was the main game changer during that game. The offense wasn't looking good. They're actually just barely in the top 3 for rushing, which I put them in. But most of those yards came in the second half when they had Derek King, because he was really moving the offense right along. Orlando, defensively, they had 3 sacks, 5 tackles for losses, 2 interceptions. They looked good. They looked really good. I think Terrell Buckley had something moving with them on defense. It wasn't flashy, but it was getting the job done. But at the end of the day, their offense gave up 2 more interceptions and turnovers than Houston did. So that's a major problem. That will actually get you a win. If you're Orlando, don't worry about it. Keep working on them. Their secondary, I'd be a little more concerned about. I mean, they did get 2 interceptions, but Houston did have a slightly higher completion percentage than a lot of the other teams. St. Louis, they had 2 sacks, 1 interception, and then 8 tackles for losses. They played a standard game. It wasn't fun to watch their game, and I had to turn off, the TV right before the game ended. It was getting good. And then finally at last place, Seattle, which Jim Haslett was hired for his defensive prowess. And in my opinion, he did not deliver that at all. Only 4 tackles for losses. They did not record a single sack and only 1 interception, which was just a poorly thrown ball from Jordan Teamu. So that rounds out my defense. In the rankings, at number 1, I have Houston. At number 2, I have San Antonio. Overall, now San Antonio may say, hey, that's a little high. Here's my thing. Houston looked the absolute best. San Antonio, all you have to do is not allow that 2-minute comeback. Okay, you're not the Atlanta Falcons. You can stop that. All right. So San Antonio fixes that. They're well on their way to having a great success. St. Louis I'm putting them actually right below. If it was anybody that was not A.J. McCarron, there's no way that they wouldn't have won that game. I'm just going to put that out there. You've got a veteran quarterback with the last 2 minutes, and he didn't really even look that good through most of the game. DC at number 4, I think if they dump Jordan Teamu, bench him, play Derek King, let him throw, let him cook a little bit, he was a major X factor in that game, and he did score one of their 2 rushing touchdowns, and he put up a decent number of yards on the ground as well. Number 5, I have Dallas. Even though they put up more defensively than DC, their offense only put up 6 points. Drew Plitt, I would be surprised if they might experiment with Kyle Sloter. It would surprise me if he did stay in the whole game next week. Number 6, Las Vegas. The main complaint I have from Las Vegas is defensively, it was pretty good. Offensively, if you keep throwing pick sixes, 2 per game, you're not going to win. Other than that, you fix that. I think Las Vegas jumps up this board really quickly. Number 7, Orlando. Another turnover sort of thing. Paxton Lynch is not your answer. Maybe he is. I mean, we didn't get a big look at Paxton Lynch. Quarterback-wise, they're going to get DeAndre Francois back. I would experiment with him instead of their quarterback number 2. I forget his name. Quentin Normandy, maybe? And then number 8, Seattle. And the reason I have Seattle so low is just the lack of defense. With Jim Haslett, it wasn't looking good. They blew a lead late on the game. And even though they were very, 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 very close to winning in a crazy stadium, they fumbled the football. And so I have Seattle number 8. I think they could go a little higher. But all in all, here's what I know is I know that Houston is the best team, all in all. Worst team, stat-wise, would be DC because they're just mediocre. And they're bad at passing. So you can experiment with this. It's only week 1. A lot of these games you can view as just get right games. Houston got it right from the beginning. Wade Phillips looked absolutely amazing. So, I mean, nothing bad about Houston other than maybe try experimenting with Cole McDonald a little more or Caleb Ellaby. I think Brandon Silvers, he played great. And so if he keeps playing great, I wouldn't be too terribly concerned. So just watch out for him. San Antonio, you got to work on the receivers. I'd say there was one thing that some YouTube guru or whatever said. He was not impressed with the star power of the league. I'll say this, is there were a lot of wide receiver drops. Just passes that should have been made, but they didn't come up with the ball. That's what I would attribute to this. DC, a lot of dropped passes. Dallas was another one, a lot of dropped passes. Las Vegas, a lot of dropped passes. So work on that. If you're the wide receiver coach, make sure they got hands, soft hands, okay? Don't let them be too soft or else they just bounce off your hands. But so quarterback play is passable, is easily passable for this. That's what I would rank that. I just work on the wide receiver ability during this game. All in all, pretty good. Now, let me just go over predictions real quick. So, prediction-wise, Seattle. I think they're going to beat the St. Louis Battlehawks. I would attribute Seattle winning to just Ben DiNucci, the Gucci. Defense didn't look great, but that's beside the point. I think the Vegas Vipers beat DC. I'd attribute that to just DC's lack of offense. Vipers, all you got to do is just not throw 2 critical interceptions late in the game or early or whenever. Then you've got the Guardians. I think they're going to lose against the Brahmas. The Brahmas had a really good offense. They were a slow and steady team, but I think they can limit the Guardians. And then Houston, actually going to be at this game, Houston versus the Renegades. I think Houston's going to win for the fact that they're just a more well-rounded offense. And defense looked amazing. So that's all I have for you today. Goodbye.